Action.
Total, I'm just gonna take these back.
What? Where'd my stack of books go? Here, without further ado, is a no-nonsense, quick video about my top 10 books that I read in 2024. Maybe a little bit of nonsense. We're doing this in order of the top 10. So this is the worst one of my favorite books of the year. Who is delivering my number 10 book? Number 10. Oh, who's this?
He's a bear.
What's his name? Bear. Okay, thank you, Bear. Number 10, My Death by Lisa Tuttle. This is published by New York Review Books, and this is a reissue. This was originally published way back in 2004, and then it was republished in 2023. This is a quirky, strange, weird little book, my favorite kind of book. As you'll see, weird books make a big showing on this list. This is about a woman who's a writer. She's a recent widow, and she's hit a big writer's block. She cannot figure out what to write next. And she decides kind of on a whim in a meeting with her, I think her agent, that she is, suddenly comes up with this idea to write a biography of this other writer and painter that she's admired for a really long time. And when she first comes up with this idea to write this biography, she assumes that this other woman is dead because she's, I think at this point, like 100 years old. And she is surprised to learn from her agent that, oh, actually, in fact, this woman is alive. And so she makes plans to interview this other writer, and strange things start happening from there. Strange similarities between the narrator's life and this older woman's life just start to turn up, and it turns really weird and creepy, and it's a quirky, fun, creepy little book. Number 9.
I bet you remember that guy's voice. Guess.
Chameleon.
No!
Shit.
You forgot my voice. Come on now.
Just start naming animals. Okay. Turtle. Frog. Penguin.
That's frog. That's penguin. That's penguin.
Okay.
That's grumpy turtle.
Okay. Who is it? I'm out of guesses. Okay. Oh, Ape. Okay, come on, you gotta deliver.
Yeah. I think
Ape.
Still guessed once.
Oh yeah, Ape. Welcome back to the show, Ape. This is Ape, and Ape is delivering number 9, which is About Uncle. This is by Rebecca Gisley. It's translated by Jordan Stump, and it's published by Two Lines Press.
Also, did you talk about Pangy?
Oh, Pangy. Oh, the guest star today is Pangy.
Yeah.
This is another weird, quirky, strange little book. The weirdest. This one made a big appearance in our lives. We talked about it at the dinner table quite often. It is about a young woman and her brother who live with their uncle. Their uncle has some health problems, maybe some mental health problems. The pandemic is kind of happening in the background.
Wasn't this in like the short books video?
You're right.
That you should do,
That's right.
You can read in one day but shouldn't.
You're right. It was in my video of short books that you could read in one day but shouldn't. Good memory, my man. Yeah, so this is weird. The uncle is very weird. It's really gross and strange, and a lot of bodily functions named in this weird little book. And yeah, there's not really a plot, but if you just like all vibes, weird, gross, creepy, but also kind of heartwarming vibes about family, then this book might just be for you.
Hello, I am green. Very green. With
Number
a tiny
8.
tail.
Number 8.
Who am I?
Number 8.
Who am I?
With a tiny tail.
Tiny tail, green.
You're some sort of turtle.
And small.
And this is Turtle delivering Cesaria by Hannah Nordenhoek. Translated.
I thought I called Celeste.
Oh, Celeste. Yeah, no, I think it's Cesaria by Hannah Nordenhoek, and it's
No. Oh, no.
translated by Saskia Vogel. This is an atmospheric, strange little book. There's name.
For the noise people, this whole pile of books may have fell over.
You better not have gotten out of order, or
Don't worry.
somebody's gonna be in trouble.
Yeah.
And that somebody is
And that is...
Ape.
No, stop!
Cesaria is a weird little novel that takes place in the woods of, Sweden, the forests on a remote country estate in Sweden at the dawn of modern gynecology. It's about a young girl named Cesaria. She is an orphan. She was delivered by C-section by the man who then, a surgeon, who then kind of stole her away and brought her to this remote country estate and keeps her hidden away from the world there. And she lives a really isolated, sad life there and has no way of escape, has no way of interacting with the outside world except for the few infrequent visitors that come by, like the piano tuner who is weird, and then they have a kind of a rotating maid servants who come in to work on this estate, and one woman who takes care of Cesaria and another man who takes care of the farmland around them. And she lives this very isolated life. And what I love most about this book is the atmosphere and the descriptions of the house and the objects in the house and the forest that surrounds them. It's just some of the most beautiful descriptive writing of this remote forest land, and I really enjoyed this. This is published by Book Hug Press. Number 7. Send number 7 around, please. Oh, some sort of dog? Small dog.
Who am I?
Wolf, wolf, small dog. Tail?
No.
Yes! Oh. This is Tail, and he has delivered. Number 7 is Hersht 07769, and this is by Laszlo Krasznahorkai. And this is not illustrated, this is translated by Audelie Mulzet, and it's published by New Directions. This translation came out, I think, in 2024. This is my first book that I've read by Krasznahorkai. I loved it. My understanding from reading some reviews is that this might not be treading any new territory for him, so I'm not sure other folks loved it quite as much as I did, but since this was my first experience reading his work, I was very taken by it. So this is a one sentence novel. This entire book is one sentence, so that's 406 pages.
Yeah, I remember that.
You remember that, yeah. It's 406 pages of one sentence, and this is following, eventually you dip in and out of many different points of view. But the main character here is Florian. Florian is a gentle giant who is he seems to be an orphan.
Like Is It Cake?
Like what was that?
A gentle giant. Is this from the sword in Is It Cake?
From the Is It Cake? Oh, that's right, the baker from Is It Cake. Yeah, kind of like that, because actually he did study baking. Florian studied baking, believe it or not. This takes place in a small German town. Florian is being kind of watched after by this man who he calls the boss, and they together, their business that they do together is they go around the region removing graffiti from buildings and walls and parks and all of that. So that's kind of their day-to-day existence. But the boss is a member of a neo-Nazi group in this town. And so there's a lot of themes of rising far-right sentiments in the region, and following this whole group of neo-Nazis in this town. And so they're very interesting characters. They're kind of bumbling idiots, this group. So I'm going to talk more about this book later on, because this was one of the books that was chosen by you all as one of my fall pre-orders. So I don't want to give too much away, because I have another video coming up very soon where I talk more about this book. But I think what I loved most about it was the depiction of this small town and all of the many characters in this small town. It was such a cool way to look at this community and all of the different people that make up the community and kind of the groupthink that happens in a small community like this or a larger community. And then also Florian himself is such an intriguing character to follow, and you kind of follow his, I guess, fall from innocence type of situation. And I thought it was beautiful. So yeah, that's book number 7. Book number 6.
Okay, we have someone from Wisconsin.
Someone from Wisconsin. Delivering my book. Okay, who could it be? Oh my gosh, is it Fish Wish?
Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you, Fish Wish. You're welcome. Pages of the Sea is by Anne Hawke, and this is published by Biblioasis, and this just came out this past year. This is the book I read immediately after reading Hurst 07769. It was such a remarkable experience because I thought going into that long one-sentence novel that I would have so much trouble understanding it and following it. It was a breeze to follow. It was so smoothly written. I didn't have any trouble following along with that one-sentence novel. And then I turned to this book and I thought, okay, here we go. This is going to be, I mean, I didn't really think anything of it as I picked it up that I would have any issue like following along. Then I started to read it, and most of the narrative is very straightforward, but this is following a young girl who lives in I believe in the 1970s on a Caribbean island, an unnamed Caribbean island. Her mother has just left her and her older sisters with her aunt and cousin. The young girl's name is Wheeler. So her mother has left to go find work in England and has left her and her sisters in the care of family members. And so the part that was hard for me to follow as a Midwestern American was the sections that are in Wheeler's dialogue in dialect, but then also her thoughts are shared in her dialect. It kind of switches from narration to Wheeler's thoughts kind of without warning, and so you're just kind of suddenly plunged into a very different language within the novel without it being dialogue. And so that I really struggled to follow along with it, but I stuck with it and eventually got into the rhythm of it and was just blown away by little Wheeler and her story and her family. And it's the story of her being left behind and missing her mother and kind of the poor treatment she experiences from her other family members. But then it's just this gorgeous portrayal of this island and their life on the island. And again, this is another one that was chosen by you all as a pre-order. So I'll stop there and I will talk more about it in my upcoming video. But I thought it was absolutely beautiful. Okay, number 5. Thank you, Curious George. This is Touching the Art. It's by Matilda Bernstein Sycamore. This is number 5 on my list. And this is a memoir and it's published by Catapult. This I've talked about recently as well in my memoir video and I think in other videos as well. This is about Bernstein Sycamore's relationship with her grandmother, Gladys, who was a fairly well-known painter and who passed away within the past couple years. And it explores Gladys's art and her life and kind of her biography, I guess. It explores their relationship and how, in some ways, it was really a formative relationship for Matilda Bernstein Sycamore in terms of her finding her own artistic life, but also it was very, very toxic at the same time in a lot of ways. So a lot of this takes place in Baltimore, where Gladys was from. It talks a lot about the history of Baltimore and the history of Jewish communities in Baltimore, the history of Black communities in Baltimore, the art community of Baltimore. So that was really interesting. Yeah, lots of Baltimore. But what I loved most about this memoir was the way it was written. It was almost as if Matilda Bernstein Sycamore was figuring out things as she wrote. Like you could see the process. So she'll just like stop herself and say, like, wait, like in the moment, wait, I'm figuring this stuff out as I write it. And, you can see her writing to figure out her relationship with her grandmother. And it's just so, so beautifully done. And I loved every minute of it. There's also an amazing interview with Matilda Bernstein Sycamore on the podcast Between the Covers, and I highly recommend checking it out. I listened to that interview before reading the book, and it made me want to buy the book. So I did. All right, number 4. Aw, little penguin delivering the Penguino. The annual banquet of the Grave Diggers Guild. This is by Matthias Einar, and this is translated by Frank Wynne. This is published by New Directions. This is a chunky, amazing, weird, quirky book. So we've moved from small, short, quirky books to long, quirky books. The centerpiece of this novel is indeed an annual banquet of the Gravediggers Guild of an area in rural France. The gravediggers have made a deal with the devil that nobody dies for 3 days so that they can have their annual party, their annual banquet for 3 days, and gorge themselves on food and wine for 3 days and not have to worry about burying anybody. So that is the centerpiece of this novel, but it's bookended by 2 longer sections. The first section of the novel is the diary entries of an anthropology PhD student named David, who has moved to this rural area of France to study, for his thesis, to study the culture of this rural region of France. And he is a very goofy guy, very goofy, very charming. He's kind of full of himself, but also very ridiculous. And I love that kind of narrator who doesn't see how ridiculous they are, and how all the local people around him are just confused by his presence. Then the last section is going back to David and kind of his story in this town where he ends up making a home for himself, but it's not from his perspective anymore. Then interspersed are kind of flashbacks to other points in time, little stories of other people in the region. It's very eclectic. It's a mix of a lot of different elements, but somehow it all comes together. There's a heavy Buddhist reincarnation element as well to this novel, but I won't exactly spoil it because it's really, really, truly fabulous. The centerpiece banquet is just endless lists of amazing French food. So just for that alone, this was a favorite book of the year.
She does love food.
I do love food. Top 3. We've hit the top 3. All right. 0 delivering hot.
He was the Starguest for Halloween.
He was the Starguest.
The giant spider decoration was helping me grab
That's
them.
true. I remember that. Okay. Thank you for your reappearance, 0. Hot Springs Drive by Lindsay Hunter. This is published by Roxane Gay Books, which is an imprint of Grove. And this, I do have to say, full disclosure, Lindsay Hunter is a writing instructor for a program I'm in right now. She is amazing, but I wouldn't put this book on this list if it weren't an actual favorite. And it was. This is so good. This is like the kind of book you can't put down. It's one of those books that seems to have like everything you would want. It has gorgeous writing. It has an amazing, propulsive plot. It's got incredible characters. It's just so good. It's about these two families who live on Hot Springs Drive, and right in the beginning, there's a murder that happens. Right, the first page or first couple pages, a murder happens, and so somebody dies. You know who dies. And then you kind of have a hint of maybe who it is even. And then you're leading up, through the first section of the book to who actually did it, even though you kind of have a sense of maybe who did. But then you go on from there, and you get, it rotates among all these different perspectives, different points of view, chapter by chapter, which is another thing I love. So you see the story from all the different family members' points of view, the kids, the parents. And then it shifts yet again. Once you're like halfway through the book, you start to get more points of view, and it's very spicy. This is the book that as I started reading it, I always bring a book with me when I go to pick up at school. And then for the few minutes that the kids play on the playground after school, I read. And yeah, this is the kind of book where I'm like reading it at the playground and thinking, this is a funny place to be reading this book. Very, very spicy. Very spicy book.
Spicy? That's
spicy.
What one of the YouTubers I watch uses. He's a Lego builder.
A Lego builder uses the word spicy?
Yes.
Interesting. Anyway, this is a spicy book. All right, let's do number 2.
It must be sad to pick a number 2 because it's so close, but you didn't quite make it.
Didn't quite make it, but so close. So close to number 1. Come here, Chipmunk. Come on. It's your time to shine. Thank you, Chipmunk. You're welcome. My Lesbian Novel by Renee Gladman. This is published by Dorothy, a publishing project, and they also have 4 or 5 other Renee Gladman books that they've published. One of their very first books that they published was the first in Renee Gladman's Ravika trilogy. I have not read any other Renee Gladman books, and I'm actually really glad I started with this one because she talks kind of about her other writing in here. This book is going to be really hard to just... It's like, I don't know if it's nonfiction. It's really hard to say if it's nonfiction or fiction. It's kind of a mix.
So realistic fiction.
Yeah, maybe. The structure of this is an interview with Renee Gladman and another unknown interviewer. The interview is about the lesbian romance novel that Renee Gladman is trying to write, but she's having trouble writing it because she's not used to writing conventional fiction. She's used to writing very experimental fiction. And so you get the interview, but then you also get excerpts from this romance. And so it's all about writing fiction. And it's about romance. It's about lesbian romance as a genre in general. And it is mind-blowing for me. It's exactly what I love to read. It's got all of these like goodies, like little snippets about writing fiction in here, about what it's like for... It's about writing. She's talking about her process of writing fiction and how she does it. So it's kind of nonfiction, but then it's also fiction because you get... What is it? Anyway, it's good and I loved it. And number 1, we have Delivered by Cardinal, Grumpy Turtle, Pokemon Ball, and Frogurt.
Oh.
Thank you. Number 1 is The Long Form by Kate Briggs. This is also published by Dorothy. And yes, my top 2 books of the year were published by Dorothy. I love everything about this book down to its delicious floppiness. I have another whole video about this, so I'll link to it and won't go too in depth here, but this novel is about a young mother who has a little baby, new baby, and she's a single mom, and she is kind of just going about her day, her morning with her little baby. Kind of right in the middle of the morning, a package is delivered, and that package is a novel. And that novel is The History of Tom Jones by Henry Fielding. So it is a real novel, and I actually own it, but I haven't ever read it yet.
What? Come on!
It's a classic, very old novel, considered possibly as one of the first novels, right, ever written, I believe. So this novel is the story of Helen and her baby Rose as they go about their day, but then it's also about novels themselves, novel as an art form. There's snippets of other theoretical writings from big thinkers about the novel, including Roland Barthes, and there's just a lot of amazing writing about writing novels and comparing writing and reading a novel to caring for a baby. And it is brilliant, and I loved it. and I highly recommend it if you're into that kind of thing, that kind of plotless, experimental, but very touching, moving, thought-provoking kind of novel. So that's number 1 for 2024, The Long Form by Kate Briggs, published by Dorothy. Should we do some honorable mentions here before we go?
Yes, which are all 14 animals.
Okay, we'll do the honorable mentions of the animals at the end here, but first I want to mention some books that didn't make the list. There are lots of books that I loved pretty much as these 10 books that didn't make the list for various reasons, just maybe because I needed to come up with a list. But there are some other specific books I want to mention that will continue to impact me and the way I think about novels and writing and books in the future. So they're important and they're honorable mentions because I will continue to think about them constantly, and they have greatly impacted how I talk about books and think about books. And one of those is How to Draw a Novel by Martine Solares. This is published by Grove and it's translated by Heather Cleary. And this is basically Solares just taking a bunch of famous novels and drawing their plots, basically drawing the structure of these famous novels with these kind of sketches. And it's so cool. It's just so cool to think about that. And I did a whole video where I did this for the shortlisted books on the Republic of Consciousness Prize last year. I drew their plots and the book's structure as these little drawings here. And it's great. The reason it's not in the top 10 is there are some chapters in here that are a little tedious, but overall, the thought behind this book has changed the way I think about books. So honorable mention 1. Honorable mention 2 has completely changed the way I think about publishing in the United States, publishing of fiction specifically in the United States, and that's Big Fiction. It's written by Dan Sinekin and it's published by Columbia University Press. And the subtitle is How Conglomeration Changed the Publishing Industry and American Literature. And this has just been an incredible resource for me in understanding the history of publishing fiction in the United States over the past half century, or maybe a little bit more than a half century, since like the 1950s. It's brilliant, but there are a lot of structural issues I had with how it was written. There were parts that were a bit tedious and confusing, so it didn't make the top 10, but it will absolutely change how I think about books. Another honorable mention that I don't have down here with me is the first 2 books of Septology by Jan Fosse, translated by Damien Searles. I read those 2, so I believe those first 2 books are called The Other Name, I think. Well, anyway, as soon as I finish the full Septology, you can bet that will be on my top books of the year, but I want to finish the full thing before I add it to my top 10 list. It'll be on there for sure. So those are my honorable mentions for the year and my top 10 books of the year. I would lift them up, but they are in a big pile with a bunch of animals right now. Thank you so much for joining me. It has been an amazing year. Thank you for all of your support, your comments, your encouragement, your gifts. I have loved being part of this community this past year. It's been a real ride and so brought me so much joy, brought my whole family really so much joy being able to share this with them as well. So I want to thank you and wish you a happy 2025, and I'll be seeing you soon with more great books from independent and nonprofit publishers. In the meantime, my name is Sarah and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.